All right, we are live. Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you're joining from. Thank you for being with us. My name is Shuchi, and I am your host and moderator for today. Feel free to chime in with any questions anytime during our conversation, and we will do our best to address them. And of course, chat, feel free to put in any comments there. And I hope everyone in the San Francisco Bay Area is safe. I'm just grateful that I have power to even host this conversation. Interesting times, definitely, that we live in. And I think more so than now than ever, we really need to rethink and reprioritize how we do things and the role that each of us plays in it. So to help us get started on that path, I have two amazing leaders who are with us and who will be talking to us about the environment, social, and governance aspects of an organization. So without further ado, ladies, good morning and welcome. Let's start with take us through your intros, backstory, and what got each of you started in the space. Kenzie, if you want to kick us off.
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you for inviting me today. And as far as how I got into this space, I actually first heard about ESG in 2007. I was working at Goldman Sachs in New York in private wealth management, and Goldman launched their GS Sustain group in 2007, which produces excellent ESG research. A client asked us to send them one of the GS Sustain reports. I ended up reading it, and it was a cloud parting moment for me. ESG just made sense. It made good business sense to me. And that really got my attention. And after working at Goldman for almost 6 years, I ended up moving to consulting to Teneo, where I currently work as a managing director focused on ESG. And at Teneo, 12 years ago, I had the opportunity to do my first ESG project. It was an survey, an investor survey on ESG. And so if you can imagine, in 2011, I was so disappointed when the results came out, and it was a resounding, no, investors don't care about ESG. Despite that, I knew that I really was interested in this space. And after doing a second ESG project at Teneo, I knew I wanted to make it my full-time career. So I ended up moving to another consulting firm, started their first ESG client offering, and I ultimately ended up being recruited to go in-house and work for a client, Truist, where I got the chance to build their ESG program from the ground up after the merger of SunTrust and BB&T. Now, full circle, I am back at Teneo. My 1-year anniversary of rejoining was yesterday, and I'm doing ESG consulting, and I get to work with some great people like Edwa. So I'm letting her tell her story.
Yes, thank you.
Amazing. Yes, Kenzie, I can't believe it's only been 12 months though. Can I just say that? I feel like we've known each other so much longer than that. I think in this work, you get close very quickly, and I am excited that I both get to work with you and call you my friend. So I just wanted to put that on the record, because I can't believe it's only been 12 months.
I know. I think the other day you said 2 years.
I was like, it's got to be like 18 months or something.
I didn't want to correct you.
Close. You're good. So my name is Edwa Dickerson, and I am the VP of ESG and Finance Strategy here at ServiceNow. For those of you who are joining from outside our organization, I have a little bit more of an unconventional experience of getting into ESG. I spent most of my career in the space of finance, or in consulting or management consulting, but primarily focused on large M&A transactions, how you protect revenue during major transactions and major transformations. And so my experience is deep on the finance and governance side. So I like to joke that I am a recovering auditor who has really found her true calling now here in ESG. Another part of my background is I'm obviously very involved in my community. I shouldn't say obviously, I am very involved in my community. I've had the pleasure of leading ERGs at a very large scale, 4,000 to 5,000 employees of those memberships, and getting to work with senior executives around racial equity commitments and transformation of what that experience feels like for the employee inside of an organization as well. And so when I got the chance to learn more about ESG through ServiceNow's commitment at the end of 2020 and the beginning of 2021, where we launched our first strategy, I was hooked. I thought, wow, this is bringing everything together. I have had the opportunity to learn more about how climate change and the effects of it have a disproportionate effect on communities of color or under-resourced and underserved communities around the world. And that just opened me up completely. And I feel so lucky that this is my everyday, that I get to think about this and I get to help make a really amazing impact with my team and with colleagues like Kenzie as well.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both for everything that you do and how you show up and truly walking the talk. And Edwa, I echo your sentiments. Kenzie and I think our first call was just a few weeks ago, and it just instantly we were, and so thank you. But so can you take a moment to just give us a lay of the land based on your own experiences? Kenzie, you worked across a portfolio of companies, and Edwa, you've been kind of involved, you have been involved in actually for ServiceNow's ESG strategy. For folks that may not be familiar with what ESG is and why is it important and why should they care? Like, can you just give us a little more context?
Yeah, I can jump in on that one. So a few things to say on that. Why they should care, there are many reasons, but why you may be interested, one of them is we are living in a truly historic time for ESG as non-financial data is becoming standardized, right? So we've had reporting and accounting for financial data for about 100 years, a little less. But that revolution is just now happening with non-financial ESG data, and it's not going away. So despite the anti-ESG movement that we have all been watching brew in DC, the rest of the world has embraced ESG and moved forward. You know, major ESG regulation came out in Europe with the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, or CSRD. And, you know, I do think that we'll eventually get there in the United States, you know, but at the end of the day, sadly, there's a lot of misconceptions about ESG. You know, what is ESG? There are some different definitions or ways people think about it, but for me, I think of it as being a framework that helps companies with better risk management and supports long-term value creation. It's not about imposing ethical values on anyone. I really hope that we, you know, get more education around ESG. In addition to risk management and long-term value creation, it's also about helping companies keep their social license to operate. Stakeholders care about companies being responsible across environmental, social, and governance areas. And we're finding with our clients that, you know, in the midst of this anti-ESG movement in the US, they may not want to use the term ESG as much, but they aren't backing down on their ESG commitments, which I see as a positive.
Wonderful. Edwa?
Yeah, Kenzie, I love that where you ended, and I'm just going to say this part, but then I want to go back to what I perceive as the lay of the land. The point on organizations backing off or leaning in or choosing to stay consistent with their commitment to ESG. Being a part of this community of sustainability leaders, I get to have a lot of really fantastic conversations, often over a meal or a nice glass of wine. And several of us have been talking about this exact thing. And the reality is also, well, you know, investors, they very much care today. Those voting policies and expectations haven't changed either, right? So you're not seeing a shift in the way the ecosystem is approaching this. It's just a way in which we're acknowledging that, you know, some folks are expressing their skepticism, but we all know and can see that this is still very important. In fact, I wanted to share a quick statistic with all of you, we recently closed a Thought Lab global survey of about 100 executives, which was run from November to December of 2022. And according to that survey of this 1,000 cross-vertical international executives, 32% reported that achieving, not just setting, but achieving their ESG goals is a top 3 strategic priority for 2023. But more explicitly, and I mean, that just means that's top 3, right? But I imagine that we would get a much larger number if we talked about top 5 or top 10 goals and areas of focus. And then among European executives, it is the second most important strategic priority, 33%, just behind accelerating digital transformation. So I saw in the chat someone raise how connected digital and sustainability are, and I couldn't agree more. This is just so much the case, and I'm seeing that as well. I feel like Kenzie and I are 2 halves of a brain sometimes, because I couldn't agree more about the fact that ESG has proven from research, right, that this is tied to enterprise value creation. It's very much closely linked in financial performance over the long term. We shouldn't be thinking about these as separate things. It's a both in every way, and you don't have to choose between the planet and people or prosperity or profit. Like, these things can truly sit together. I think the only other thing that I wanted to mention is, for us here at ServiceNow, I have had the opportunity to develop amazing relationships with a number of our executive committee members, our C-suite here at ServiceNow. And what I am so inspired by is that this is important to each of them personally, as well as on behalf of and in the spirit of what we are doing here at ServiceNow. And so when we all had the opportunity to say, hey, we want to put this not just front and center, but like more so integrated into how we think about our strategy, it has been truly consistent from the top down, and everyone is wrapping their arms and asking, how can I get involved? It's so critical, and I just have found that to be really inspiring. It's a business imperative because of the value it can create for our customers. They have these expectations of us. Our employees have the same expectations that we are doing business and we are doing good. But I also am just really proud to say that I'm a part of an organization where this is not just a talk. This means something really important to so many within our organization.
Absolutely. I think it's possible to do well and do good at the same time. So it's wonderful to see us actually walk the talk on that. But can I request our audience to please, if you can put the questions in the Q&A, it helps me stay organized so we can get that addressed, and keep your comments in the chat. All right. So there's a lot of commitments being made across the globe when it comes to ESG, right? What are some of the challenges that you personally perhaps are faced with, or you, Kenzie in particular, that you're seeing the industry be faced with when it comes to moving from commitments into actions?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I know that was such a big theme at last year's COP event. You know, it's this movement from aspiration to action. And I think that we all know that so many companies have come out and made long-term targets around ESG or climate or diversity. And those are all well and good, but you have to have a roadmap that backs that up. So a lot of my work at Teneo is helping clients, you know, figure out their ESG strategy, set their ambitions, and execute. I think that one challenge a lot of companies are facing is having people with the right skills. So we do find that a lot of companies will tack on an ESG responsibility to an existing, you know, person's job. And not only can that hurt their capacity and their work-life balance, but, you know, if you're going to do that, companies have to make sure they upskill those people. And I do find that, yeah, exactly. And I do find that that people want to know more about ESG. I mean, for a long time, the groups that mostly favored ESG were young people or younger generations, women, and high net worth individuals. I think that, you know, that's really expanded. And even just at Teneo, I find young people that will ask, to learn about ESG or sit in on a client call. So I think that, there are ways for companies to get the right skill set, but they just need to, upskill. Another thing companies are struggling with is data. And, I've loved working with ServiceNow and helping them with their ESG reporting software and broader ESG command center. But we find that so often, in the recent past, ESG has been something that companies, ESG data is something that companies have been, tracking on a spreadsheet. And that's fine. I mean, when I was in-house, we did have some spreadsheets where we tracked ESG information, but, more and more we're seeing companies like ServiceNow build ESG reporting software that really helps companies not only get scale, but also help with accuracy and validation of the data. I mentioned earlier that we're going through an evolution or revolution in ESG where, it's becoming standardized, but a big part of that is getting accurate, decision useful, and timely disclosures. So I think, we find companies having that challenge. I often recommend ServiceNow's software, and I'll let Edwa talk more about that too.
Thanks, Edwa. Go ahead.
Awesome. Yeah, searching for my mute button there. Yeah, it's funny how many of these conversations we've had in so many different ways, Kenzie. So what are some of the challenges when you talk about talent to help drive and execute this work? I couldn't agree more. I want to pull back from that a little bit and just talk about one thing that I feel very strongly about, and I believe that we have embraced here at ServiceNow, which is that while I do have a phenomenal team, I see a few of them commenting in the chat, so I just want to give them a quick shout out. Amazing team of ESG subject matter experts who help to enable the rest of the business and execute on several of our deliverables with respect to our strategy. ESG is everyone's job within an organization. The same way risk management is, the same way DE&I is. And so to the point on the team itself, that core team that helps to set that vision, enable that strategy, empower the organization, and then hold them accountable, there is skill sets there that are needed, absolutely. I do think there's transferable skills. I'm one of those people that can be applied to this space. And then upskilling is absolutely critical. But the fact is that we truly can and should be empowering and enable the rest of the organization to lean in. And I'm so proud of what our data center team has done. For example, they are training up all of the members of that cloud team to really understand sustainability. And I'm not going to spoil any of the leads in our report that's coming out in about 6 weeks or so. So I'm not going to give away anything. But when I tell you, I am so proud of how they are leaning in and upskilling that talent. So we all can play from the positions within the organization which we're in. But preparing that next generation of ESG leaders, sure, but also we're all leaders of these very important aspects of our culture and really the mission of our organizations. Data is absolutely something that I've seen people really struggling with. And for people who've already met me and know me, you know that this comment is wrapped in love and adoration for all of the amazing work that has happened in this space up until this point. But there has been a lot of work that sat traditionally in communications and marketing, and the level of like rigor and understanding and even process management and oversight of like what that looked like to get to the fantastic reports we've all enjoyed over the last couple of decades. I mean, honestly, they're all heroes in my book because it's kind of impossible. But as we move toward a more regulated space, having tools and mechanisms that enable you to have the same level of confidence you might have in financial disclosure around a non-financial disclosure like ESG is a huge challenge for folks. I also think moving from a target, a goal, or an aspiration into the impact. So not just into an action, but into actual impact and the accountability behind that entire life cycle, and then impact, which is then monitored, and then new targets are set, et cetera. And so it's really a life cycle, as I said, that can be challenging for folks. First, there's nervousness about setting a target or a goal, because what if I can't reach it? What does it mean? How aspirational should I be versus how much should I just say what I know I can achieve? But then I have to operationalize that. I have to mobilize against those goals and that strategy. Okay, how am I going to do that if I have a team of 3 supporting a multi-thousand person company, right? Our team is just a couple of handfuls big, and we are almost 23,000 employees, but this is why it's everyone's job. But moving from how you set a strategy, but then you actually, again, empower and enable and then hold accountable the organization is so critical. And I think that is a challenge that a lot of organizations face right now. An empowered leader and an empowered team, and a motivated and inspired and just well-enabled organization. And then, yeah, I mean, I already talked about the data, but those are some other observations, I guess, just a little bit of plus one to what Kinsey already delivered. But I think some of those other challenges around organizing yourself, enabling the business, and enabling the people to lean in. And then I think the last piece, actually, I will highlight this, is what we've been really focused on, and you're going to see some of this in our report that's to come, and even more so in some of the amazing projects and some of the amazing work that myself and my team are getting ready to launch as part of our 2023 strategy and execution, is just how we actually live in the space of intersection between ES and G. There's a lot of organizations who are looking at it in a very myopic or almost singular way, and recognizing the interplay and the relationships, like I talked about a little bit of what has inspired me and motivated me to lean into this space, and really, I think, dedicate the rest of my career to this space in every way that I can, is there is so much intersection and there's interplay. And so taking the time to understand what that means, and then developing really thoughtful and intentional solutioning that holds it together, because you can fix one thing. For those of you who do come from a finance background or what have you, or business process background, maybe you fix one thing upstream and then downstream you realize you totally screwed something up for another team, and you're like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. In the space of people and planet, that can be an issue as well. And so we really need to be thinking about how these things hang together, and do our best to work together and holistically in the path forward. Sorry, those were thoughts I had.
I have to jump in there real quick, because first of all, I have to give a shout out to my team now that Edward did that. I am sure they aren't watching because they're too busy, and they're the best. So Navi, Heidi, Adia, Gabby, thank you. And then the only other thing I was gonna say was, Edward, you mentioned setting targets and maybe this fear of setting targets. And that's something that we find a lot of, because we do have companies that have missed targets at this point. Some of them had set targets for 2020 or 2022. And, I think at the end of the day, while I would never encourage a company to set a target that's unachievable or unrealistic, I do think that it's okay if you do miss a target as a company. Right now, we're not seeing the market punish companies for that. You won't see, oh, the stock, just totally plummeted because this company missed this target. What you may see is, during proxy season, some of the voting may be impacted, over time if a company is not reaching its commitments. But I do encourage companies to reach, and to Edward's point, make it everyone's responsibility. And Teneo has, as a senior advisor, Pia Heidemark Cook. She's the former Chief Sustainability Officer of IKEA. And one thing that she always says that I love is, as a Chief Sustainability Officer or as someone in ESG, your job is to make the company uncomfortable. And if it's not, you aren't pushing the company to where it should be. And so I just think that's an important reminder that, part of this job is at times going to uncomfortable places or trying to think through some really tough decisions. But, I don't discourage companies from trying to, reach.
Amazing. Oh, anything else, Edra, to add to that? No. Okay,
Good.
cool. Well, I kind of want to double click on the skills development part, because as we know, not a lot of people understand the ESG concept in its entirety. Based on your personal experiences, are there places where people, including myself, can perhaps bring ourselves up to speed, learn about it, or to also be a part of the solution, right? So like you mentioned, it's not just one person who's responsible for the ESG strategy for a company. It's all of us as individuals who also have a key role to play in it. So from your own personal journeys, experiences, like, was it an evolving process, or is there a place that one can get a degree, if you will? Or how does one learn? How does one get started?
Absolutely. Kenzie, I'm going to have you go first because you've seen the evolution of upskilling in this space as well. And then I'll just give a little quick shout out for the things I did to be able to keep up with my team.
Yeah, so I actually get this question a lot because, while I started working on ESG a really long time ago, and back when it was not popular, I feel like I had to piece stuff together slowly over time. And I relied a lot on one of my mentors, Michelle Edkins at BlackRock, who is amazing and has taught me so much over the years. She was one of the people I worked on my second ESG project with over a decade ago. So I think it's always good to find people that are experts and learn from them. As far as formal training, there are so many great options out there. I personally am a huge fan of SASB. I did the FSA, or Fundamentals of Sustainability Accounting, levels 1 and 2. It's more, I would say though, it's more for, I think, someone that is already used to the concepts of ESG. But as far as, some more, early ESG learning opportunities, there are great continuing education classes on ESG at universities around the world, and you can do them remotely. They have very easy schedules. I mean, there's everything from NYU to Oxford to Cambridge. I mean, even I'm in Nashville, and I'm even starting to see, Belmont and Vanderbilt, have these courses, which is so great. So you can always go that route. And then there are certifications you can get, for example, around the GRI or the Global Reporting Initiative. And there are also just some good webinars. I feel like in this day and age, with the democratization of information that we call the internet, there's so many great webinars. Just find a trusted source, and there really are some excellent ways to just get up to speed on ESG. The last thing I would say is ESG is constantly evolving. I wake up every day excited to see what has changed, because there's so many moving parts to ESG. So I think just staying on top of the news is a big part of being an expert, because the book of ESG is really still being written.
Wonderful. Amazing. So yes, and it's interesting, John and Callan had actually put a question around kind of early in career, and I'd love to talk a little bit about that after we talk about upskilling, because I just think that there's like synergy and experience and talent building. So I am one of those people who took the courses at Harvard and NYU as a part of my upskilling, as well as signing up for some of those phenomenal podcasts that are out there. MSCI has an ESG Now, I think is what it's called, a podcast that's on Spotify that I listen to pretty regularly. I think it depends on what you're looking to learn. So if you're kind of trying to understand the breadth, the complexity of this space and all of the ways that organizations or communities or nonprofits are leaning into this, I think there's lots of really great podcasts out there that are I just find to be super helpful. Within an organization, I genuinely encourage you all to reach out to your ESG team to find out what resources they have developed that can help you understand specifically the issues and topics that are relevant to your organization. there is a lot of phenomenal effort that goes into defining the material topics of an organization. What do those material topics represent? They represent, for us, we do double materiality. So both our impact on the organization and the business, but also our impact on society and the environment. But we actually go through a pretty rigorous process with outside support to help us understand what that looks like. And then we select those areas of focus. So we go even deeper on that because we know that the organization is part of the specific journey that we're on here at ServiceNow, and other organizations will be the same. We need to develop the collateral. And as I talked about enablement of an organization, we started earnestly in the thick of it. We started our journey as a company 2 years and 2 months ago. Okay, we launched our
crazy
strategy.
all the time how much they accomplished. When she's all down on, oh, we haven't done enough, I'm like, can I remind you, please?
2 years and 2 months from when we shared our first strategy with all of the employees of ServiceNow at that time. And we then, you know, like I said, just from an enablement perspective, we had to take the time to actually bring more information. What were the standards? What are some of those resources that the leaders who owned various components of the strategy and the impact that we've ultimately had, how do we enable them? And so I definitely encourage you to reach out to your sustainability or your ESG leaders. Also, many super passionate employees who are like, we've got all these great nonprofits, or we've got all this really cool stuff going on. Definitely reach out, right? Share that information, but also take the time to listen. We are all compelled to act, especially because we understand how important this moment is. We need to be moving forward. But I also think with planning and coordination and clarity, we can have the impact we seek to have together. So I just wanted to sort of highlight that from an education perspective, is that you have some phenomenal resources within your organization. So I also subscribe to a few sort of like newsletters. I'm gonna find them and just drop them into the chat, because I kind of get the titles a little mixed up because I probably am subscribed to too many of them, but I find them really helpful because they celebrate, they amplify very specific challenges and issues that organizations are tackling. And I find that to just be really informative because it keeps me abreast of even just the happenings in the space. And I have to, again, shout out to Kinsey and her entire team, because they also, because we continue to stay engaged. We started working together last year, but we are working together this year. Yay. And we have an opportunity, they send us phenomenal like highlights and clear, hey, this is what's going on and this is what's happening. And those insights are just so invaluable because they've also done that analysis. So they're trusted advisors that you might be aligned to. And I disseminate that information to other leaders across the organization. So I think, you know, there's lots of really fantastic organizations. Teneo is one of them. They put out so much phenomenal thought leadership. Yeah, so those are some thoughts that I just wanted to put out for now.
Wonderful.
Thanks, Edward. Yeah, just
oh, go
sorry,
ahead. Go ahead,
just
Ken.
one quick thing I was going to add quickly. We are starting to see, and thank you, Edward, so much. We are starting to see companies and state, you know, enterprise-wide employee training on ESG, almost like you would do a compliance training. I'm working with one of my clients right now on this, and I think it's excellent because, to Edward's point, you know, ESG is everyone's responsibility at the end of the day. So the more you can equip your employees with that knowledge, the better. And that's a big part of our work at Teneo, is, you know, helping companies with ESG training, all the way from the board to, you know, the average employee.
Yeah, I missed one thing before we go to the kind of the next piece. We have so many phenomenal leaders that have started to join ServiceNow, especially within our ESG product area. One of them, Brittany Petit, thank you for being on the call with us today. She wanted to shout out the BARD MBA. It's the #1 green MBA in the Princeton review. And so wanted to just give that shout out. So if you know people who are, hey, I'm interested in this, and I also have an appetite to go back to school or something to that effect, there are phenomenal organizations. I know Duke has a phenomenal program. I actually got to do a lot of interesting consulting projects when I was getting my MBA. I thought that was kind of fantastic. And UC Berkeley, one of my recent hires at ServiceNow. She's in our finance rotational program. She is actually doing a rotation with the ESG team, and she just has been so excited to learn more that she's now doing a sustainability certification over at UC Berkeley. So the extension. And so I think that a lot of universities are also putting those pieces out. Kenzie spoke to it a little bit, so I sort of forgot, and I just got so excited about talking about like the research. But I do want to just highlight that because Brittany was kind enough to share that with us.
Wonderful. And can we just take a moment to acknowledge you and all the amazing women that have joined us today on International Women's Month? Thank you for, again, what you do. And it's truly inspiring. So
you too.
Yes.
Yes, us all.
Yes.
Happy International Women's Month to us all. So
Yes.
all righty. Okay, so you've had amazing journeys. You've done some incredible work, and thank you again for what you do. What have been some of the challenges that you've had to overcome? Could you speak to, perhaps for someone else who's trying to do similar things, that they can think about, be more intentional as they're walking talk?
You want to go first?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll go first on this one. Our challenge, I would say the challenge I've observed, or the greatest challenge, is like we have grown so quickly and we have a lot of super passionate folks. And so my biggest challenge is making sure that I am equipping people with the information on how they can lean in, where they can lean in quickly enough. That has been my biggest challenge. And to be fair, that means I've had it pretty great. I will acknowledge that a lot of other organizations don't necessarily have both the opportunity. I think I have an extremely strong vision, and as do the leaders on my team. I'm so grateful to Kathy Mulvaney, Lindsay Harris-Che, as well as Emer Clark, who are phenomenal leaders in their respective areas and also cross-pollinating across the team. We have an amazing vision that is brought to life through the work we get to do across the organization, but we're also extremely supported and empowered from the board to the entire executive committee, our C-suite here, Bill, Gina, every single member is really behind this work and owns their portion, as well as the cross-functional collaborations. And so I find that what I'm hearing, again, from colleagues and peers across the industry or in this functional role across different spaces, is that they don't always have that full empowerment. So I know that that's a challenge that people are facing. And I would say this is where, figuring out how to connect this work to value creation, as Kenzie talked about in the beginning, is really important, because I can tell you our customers, they ask us questions all the time. We're answering them all the time. And so we just have to think about that. Our investors, our employees, our partners, it's across the board. And so I wanted to just acknowledge that my greatest challenges are just harnessing the passion and the excitement of this organization, which again means I have it pretty great compared to some of the other sustainability leaders out there. Kenzie, I know you've seen a lot more, given that you get to work with so many great organizations.
I'm sitting here making notes so I don't forget the points I want to make. Challenges. I was thinking where to start, because when I first really decided I wanted to pursue ESG, it was not popular at all. And, sadly, I actually didn't think I would see it embraced in my lifetime, which probably sounds very pessimistic, but that's just the way things were. And I think, one thing I remember around, for example, diversity, and we're talking about International Women's Month, and for better or worse, I think that the Me Too movement actually really helped with diversity and ESG overall, in that it shined a light on how ESG does impact the enterprise value and financial performance of a company, because, we saw that culture meant more than just kind of this, fuzzy concept, nice to have, but instead, we saw that there were so many, multi-million-dollar lawsuits for, discriminatory acts or, harassment. And I think that all of that coming out, for these public companies, it was a really big deal to have, multi-million-dollar settlements. And so I think that, for me in my career, sadly, that was a turning point in many ways, where I felt like the connection of diversity and ESG and culture to value creation really started to come out, and more of that appreciation for tangible assets versus just the focus on intangible assets. But I think shortly after that, we saw the pandemic come about. We saw the racial justice movement. We've seen so many things that have really accelerated ESG that I'm very thankful for. But I think initially for me, that was a big challenge was, will this ever go mainstream? And then just some other challenges in general, and this is for myself, but also my clients, is staying on top of all of the ESG developments. We talked about that earlier, but for me, I am so interested in it that I want to read it. I think, I truly love what I do, so it doesn't feel like work to me. But for someone that's thinking about going into ESG, I think that's an important question to ask yourself is, do you want to stay on top of this stuff? Because if it feels like a chore, it may not be the right avenue, because a lot of this work will be just reading and staying on top of news. But while it's a challenge, it's also what I love about it personally. So those are just a couple things.
Yes, thank you. Well, I do want to open it up for questions from the audience, but there's one last thing that maybe we should address. How do you think the tech-enabled governance has helped you along the way and turning these ideas into actual impact? And I know we have an entire product
solution, yeah.
Edward?
And I have to just say, Kenzie already teed it up so beautifully, and I'm lucky that she had the context and had been along on part of this journey with us as we were developing and preparing to go GA, which was just general availability for everyone back in last fall. And she had been engaged with us earlier on as we were still working with limited availability. But when we think about governance, I like to talk about it as the big G and the little g. There's a G inside of ESG that may look different at different organizations, but business continuity is an example of one of our material topics, security and data privacy. So obviously cybersecurity is super critical for an organization like our own, ethics, governance, etc. But the big G is also how you wrap yourself and the organization around the whole of the strategy. And then in the setting of a target, setting of a goal, actually creating accountability.
Oh, do we?
Yeah, it's frozen, I think.
Edwa, if you can hear us. Here, but
I love the hand motion though.
I know. Kenzie, maybe
Yeah.
Get Edwa back. You want to chime in?
Yeah, so I mean, I do think that clearly I have worked with a lot of different companies, and Teneo, with building out our own ESG program, even though we're a private company and we don't have this expectation to disclose all this ESG information. Oh, there she is. Hi, Edwig.
Hi. I don't know what happened.
It's okay.
I just got restarted, but here I'm back. Okay, and then Suchi, I can't get my video back on, but if you could help me with that, that would be great. But I'll just pick up where I left off, which is just to go from the beginning of setting your goals and then being able to collect the information and being able to feel confident that it's connected to your reporting frameworks, to the goals and objectives that you're reporting to your board, has been such a gift for not just us, but several of our customers who are already using that solution. I'm going to go ahead and come back on video. Hi there, everybody. I've changed my hair since that little photo you got to see, but so I'll have to get a new picture for that. But that has just been phenomenal, and it works in beautiful concert with other parts of our platform honestly with all parts of our platform, but specifically our command center offering, which includes integrated risk management. Kenzie said it, I said it. A lot of ESG is about mitigation of risk, but it's also about acknowledging that there's not just downside risk to mitigate, but upside risk and opportunity to take advantage of, and to consider how you can, again, create value, not just for yourselves as a business, but for your customers and for your employees, which is fantastic. And also our strategic portfolio management solution allows you to actually manage those initiatives and to take stock and to move them along on the journey. So when you put that all together, it's just phenomenal. And then we obviously have this interconnectedness to everything else that we do. So from my perspective, we like to say that governance is a superpower of ServiceNow. I genuinely believe that. It's not just in the way that we think about our technology and how it enables organizations to do amazing things that are more effective, more efficient, but that drive greater value. But also, I think it's ingrained in who we are and how we think about creating value in the way we operate, right? So how we organize ourselves around great issues and challenges and opportunities, and then take that again back into the technology. So it's just really a fantastic part of who we are as an organization, but I think tech-enabled governance is core to this. Kenzie also mentioned, and I'm sorry, that video thing really threw me off, but I'll say this last point and I'll hand it to Kenzie, is the conversation is shifting from setting of goals, but to implementing solutions that really have an impact. And so we at ServiceNow talk about transforming your ESG strategy and moving it from intentions to impact, because that's what's important. It's important that we're actually moving the needle and that we're not just saying the same thing, reporting the same progress year after year, pretty reports, change a graphic or two, but no, we need to be moving the entire organization and those that we touch and partner with, nonprofits, for-profits, et cetera, forward. And so I really see governance as key to that momentum and that progression. And our solution can help you with that if you don't already use it. I'll give it over to Kenzie.
No, it's true, and governance in so many ways is the backbone of ESG. We're lucky at Teneo to have some really great governance experts like Martha Carter and Matt Filosa. And, at the end of the day, ESG, has to be elevated to the highest levels of a company to be successful, right? So a lot of what our governance team does is help companies set up ESG oversight. And to Edwa's point, just really going back to that risk management, which of course their tool helps with. The other thing I was going to say about when she was talking about ServiceNow's ESG software was, in my review of all the different tools out there, ServiceNow's the only one that is really built around material ESG topics and goal setting and progress. So, instead of leading with reporting, it leads with strategy. So I think, to Edwa's point, since we are moving, from intention to impact, I think is what you said, or aspiration to action, whatever we want to use, it is, so important to have an ESG strategy, have those execution plans, because, gone are the days where it was just talking about ESG. Now you have to show progress. And, for those that are concerned with ESG ratings and rankings, something we have noticed is this movement from, the agencies and surveys asking, have you set a net zero commitment, or have you set a DE&I commitment, to now they're asking, what is your progress on those commitments? So it's an important change that we're even seeing, in ESG ratings, which can affect access to capital. So just an important nuance there.
Okay, wonderful. There's a question from John, and I think we might have addressed part of it, but I want us to talk about representation and how important that is in the space. And the question is about his daughter, who perhaps is graduating, and is there any advice for where to start for women in ESG as a career?
Yeah, I'll say a little, and then Kenzie, I know you've been spending a lot more time mentoring and supporting young aspiring women in this space or other underrepresented talent. I, as part of this role, I get to go to a number of conferences. And I will say, in a lot of conferences, they've been working really hard at this. I was very proud to see how intentional GreenBiz this last year, just a month ago or so, was in diversifying the representation on stage, because they wanted people to feel connected, also in how they built their emerging leaders community. And so if I were to give a piece of advice, I would say this: there are leaders out there who look like you, so don't stop just because you might not see them right away. And moreover, I know that there are probably lots of questions we all have on, like, how do you navigate those first few years? How do you think about it, et cetera? Again, proud moment over here. We have two, well, really it started as three, but now it's two, because one has converted full-time into my team. Yay. We had three, but now two rotational analysts, and they get to see different parts of ESG, different parts and angles to this work. And so I think that that's also an incredibly important thing. What's made me successful, and I'll use the word wildly successful because I want to celebrate how I feel about where I am in my career and getting to do this job, has been the openness to, yes, going deep and learning, but also being open to taking on new and different topics and challenges. And I think in anyone who's early in career, but especially in this space is so vast and it's quite complex. And as you're with an organization, or you're considering which organization to join, start where you can start, where it speaks to you, because the work is not easy work, but it is joyful to Kenzie's point earlier. But then from there, allow for the work to sort of speak to you a bit, and don't be afraid to try and stretch yourself and learn new things. It's not always the quickest path is not always up. Sometimes it's a bit of a zigzag. And so I think exploring, taking on other channels to learn, like we talked about earlier, there's so many resources out there, lots of podcasts, phenomenal thought leaders that you can follow and listen to. But from there, the last thing I'll say is build your tribe, get your board of directors. There's some phenomenal leaders out there, other women, but then also plenty of phenomenal men who are very passionate about bringing up the next generation of diverse leaders from all backgrounds, women included. And I believe, reaching out to them, connecting with them, learning about their journey, learning from them is just another fantastic way to really accelerate your understanding of this space. One thing that I think we can often do is keep our heads down too much and be too focused on just looking down, but we have to look out, especially with this work. We have to understand how it's connected to the bigger picture, and how what we are doing moves the needle itself. So those are the couple of things I had in mind, John, when you asked the question. Kenzie, anything you would add?
Yeah, sitting here writing notes again. So yeah, I think everything that you said, Edwa, and then also just not being afraid if you don't have any ESG experience in your background. The reality is, I can't think of the exact stats, but most executives in senior ESG roles don't have a background in ESG because it's still relatively nascent in the grand scheme of things. And so, there are opportunities to use the relevant parts of any work you have done. And in college, the question, think about his daughter. I was helping someone with their resume a couple of weeks ago that wanted to transition into ESG. And, she had gotten her MBA, and, I told her, I was blunt. I said, to be honest, this doesn't read as an ESG resume to me. And yet she had taken all of these relevant classes, certifications, and she just didn't list the classes. And so I said, absolutely. And then, she told me, oh, wait, well, I did this project and this project. You have an ESG story, probably, even if you don't realize it. So tap into whatever relevant experience you do have. And then, as we've discussed, try to find ways to upskill where you can. And that can be a free webinar. I mean, there are so many good ones out there. And then, as far as representation, right now it does tend to be women in the field of ESG. We can debate why that is, but I do think, for me, I've found comfort in the fact that there are a lot of women that are, passionate about this space. And also women that I've reached out to cold over the course of my career and that have been willing, to talk about what they know and give advice on ESG.
Wonderful. I just want folks to be a little patient. I am taking questions in the order as they were received. So we'll get to you. We have 5 more minutes, but anything around, any thoughts on how can we as employees play a role in actually walking the talk and be more intentional in being a part of the ESG process?
Yeah, I spoke a little bit to this because
Yes.
Shuchi, I saw the comment and I was like, let me just pepper this in a little bit. So I will try to quickly do that, and then we can try to take another question, which is definitely take the time to reach out to your ESG team. There is likely opportunities that are already expressed, but they may not be as discoverable as we as sustainability leaders would like them to be. So ask those questions. Find out who your ESG leader is, understand what the opportunities are for engagement. Separately, from where you're sitting, I like to tell the story because it's such a powerful one. Our treasurer, Tim Melindy, he is the brainchild behind our racial equity fund. It was him sitting from the position within which he was in who asked the question, what can I do when the summer of 2020 occurred and we lost Brianna and George and Ahmad and so many others? And he said, what can I do? And he sat in his seat as treasurer or assistant treasurer at the time, and he defined an opportunity for ServiceNow to do great business, but also to do good and to participate in closing the generational wealth gap through home ownership and neighborhood revitalization and entrepreneurship. And so I think the point is, your ESG team may have plenty of ideas, but you may also have great ideas. And I think bouncing that off of that team and or taking it to the appropriate people within your leadership team is another way to engage, because it's just not going to take only one of us. It's really going to take us all.
I would tell them the amount.
Oh, it was $100 million racial equity fund.
You left out that part.
I know, which was deployed in February of 2021. Meaning we announced it then and we fully funded it. That means we distributed every single dollar by December 13th of that year. And we will be celebrating the return that we experienced, but moreover, the effect and the impact that has had in creating greater net worth for these families that we were looking to support. So it's just a phenomenal piece of work. And I couldn't be prouder of that team.
And I'll be quick. I was just going to say, we talked about this actually on a call yesterday at Teneo, but we are seeing an increase in employee resource groups devoted to climate, for example, or devoted to sustainability. And that's something employees, can reach out and try to form, right? Of course, work with the appropriate contacts at your organization, but we are seeing an increase in that, which historically have not been, part of traditional ERGs. And the other thing I was going to say is employees can take part because at the end of the day, Scope 3 emissions includes, business travel, and we look at employee commutes. And so, just in your own way, being responsible as much as you can is going to help your organization.
Okay, great. The next question is on CSRD. So EU, it's the how are
sustainability reporting directive.
How are U.S. companies that have perhaps a European subsidiary thinking about it?
Yeah, Kinsey, you go because you'll be able to capture everything. I'm sure that we are fully alive.
Well, my colleagues in Europe will be much more well-versed to speak on this, but yes, companies of a certain size that have operations in Europe will be expected to report under CSRD. And, so that's, to me, like I said earlier, the US, we're kind of having our moment and debates with ESG, but you're not immune as a US company to European regulation if you have operations there. And then Edwa?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would add is it's very much a part of our reporting roadmap as an organization. To that point, we have assessed where we will be required to do this based on the operations that we have and the scale and revenue that we are generating in the respective countries. And we work very closely with our statutory reporting organization in thinking even about some of the expectations around reporting today, but this will continue to evolve. But yeah, it's on our roadmap because we are a multinational with a excitingly growing European-based operation and customer footprint.
Wonderful. Well, as much as I'd love to continue the conversation, there's lots more questions. We are, our time's up, but we'll probably continue.
Yeah, it feels like we need to have a part 2.
Yes.
Offline or online.
Yes. Well, thank you both again for everything that you do. Thanks to our audience for choosing to be here and be a part of the conversation. And I hope all of us can walk the talk together. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for
Thanks,
inviting
everyone.
me. Bye.
Bye.